Women in Entrepreneurship, Getting Down to Business. This is the fourth in a series of strategic webinars we are holding with young Arab leaders. They have been a strategic collaborator with us since 2018, and we are extremely grateful for their ongoing support. To give you a brief introduction, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Pearl Initiative, we are the Pearl Initiative, the leading and only independent non-profit organisation founded to promote the business case for the implementation of the highest standards in corporate governance, accountability and transparency across the Gulf region's private sector. Launched in 2010 in cooperation with the United Nations Office of Partnerships, the Pearl Initiative aims to convene businesses, decision makers and future young leaders to take the lead in promoting and adopting greater standards of governance. The Pearl Initiative also engages with the wider business ecosystem in the Gulf region, collaborating with over 30 regional universities and partnering with over 40 companies to collectively drive our mission forward. We work as a think tank and build data by publishing cutting-edge research reports and case studies to inspire business change. Introducing the programme today, this webinar is being held as part of our Governance and SMEs programme. As you know, MSMEs are considered the backbone of the regional economy. They account for between 80% and 90% of registered companies across the region, though their contribution to regional GDP remains relatively low. As MSMEs compete with each other in a saturated marketplace and strive to be both innovative and fiscally sustainable, they must understand the fact that implementing corporate governance is the key to facilitating their growth and success. The Pearl Initiative understands the necessity and value of good governance for small business success, and in 2017 we launched the Governance and SMEs programme to engage small businesses on the importance of corporate governance for positive economic outcomes. Good governance is flexible and can be modified to fit a business's needs and is bespoke to that extent. It is not meant, as is commonly believed, for the realm of multinationals and larger corporations. MSMEs will find that applying governance policies and practices will help them build a stronger, more resilient and more profitable business than before. About today's webinar, we are pleased to have this webinar to discuss the journey and experiences of women entrepreneurs in the Gulf region. This webinar will highlight why and how women are turning to entrepreneurship in increasing numbers and the policies and protocols which can be implemented to support women as they embark on entrepreneurial journeys. This webinar then aims to explore the SME landscape in the Gulf region and the journey to start a business, discuss the business case to support women entrepreneurs, and discuss supportive policies and activities which help support women entrepreneurs both present and in the future. As I mentioned, we are holding this webinar in collaboration with YAL. Just quickly give you a brief introduction into YAL, Young Arab Leaders, for those of you that aren't familiar with Young Arab Leaders. So Young Arab Leaders is also a not-for-profit organisation founded during the World Economic Forum in 2004 under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai. YAL seeks to leverage the capabilities and expertise of its strong regional network of members in order to catalyse the entrepreneurial and professional development of the next generation of leaders. His mission and vision are to empower the next generation of leaders in the Arab world by developing a strong network of industry and business leaders to serve as mentors and role models to the youth and entrepreneurs across the region. It does so by fostering entrepreneurship and innovation and creating a hub for new business and investment opportunities. YAL has also got a mentors and advisors network, is engaged in community initiatives such as entrepreneurship workshop series, a mentorship program, and weekend competitions, and has a vast support network. Once again, thank you to YAL and Nabra Al-Busaidi for collaborating with us on this webinar. Finally, to introduce our esteemed speakers today, we'd like to welcome our brilliant leaders today, Lucy Chow, YAL Speaker, Senator, UAE, WBAF Executive Committee and Global Women Leaders Committee, and Mashal Waqar, YAL Speaker, Co-Founder and CTO, The Tempest. Lucy Chow contributes regularly to entrepreneurship, corporate innovation and investors events and forums as a speaker, moderator and a judge. She is also passionate about developing entrepreneurial skills in students. Lucy has a degree from Kellogg Graduate School of Management, Northwestern University and Hong Kong University of Science and Technology and the University of British Columbia. Mashal is a media entrepreneur, startup mentor and a Lord of the Rings fanatic. Mashal is levelling the media landscape as co-founder and COO of The Tempest, a women's media company reaching millions of monthly readers. Mashal was honoured in the 2019 Forbes Middle East 30 Under 30 list and the 2019 Entrepreneur Middle East Achieving Women of the Year. Mashal is passionate about accessibility and intersectional growth for female entrepreneurs in the startup ecosystem. Lucy and Mashal, welcome. Thank you very much for your time and for contributing to this webinar today. And I hope you make the most of this session. To just quickly confirm with you, everybody, we do hope that our webinars maintain their interactivity. I know it's not quite the same as having an in-person event, but the webinar function does have a series of functions where you can file your questions through to Mashal and Lucy, and they can receive them live and will address those throughout the webinar. So try and make it as interactive as you can, and feel free to capitalize as much as you can on their wonderful insights and experience. So thank you both, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Yasmin.
Thank you.
You know, I think, Mashal, one of the things we can start off by saying is, you know, you and I talked about this yesterday, and although this is titled for women entrepreneurs, I think what we're sharing out is equally applicable to any entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think what we're going to be discussing here really applies to anyone who has been running their own business, you know, folks in the startup ecosystem. And I want to say like freelancers and just folks in the industry as well.
Yes, awesome. Okay. So what's the reality? We thought that, you know, we couldn't, obviously, I think when we first scheduled this, COVID wasn't such a so big a part of our life, but you'll see that we're obviously addressing entrepreneurship in this particular situation. So.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we definitely want to start with what the landscape is right now.
Did you want to take this, Mashal, the 2.8% funding?
Yes, of course. So I mean, if we look at, to be honest, I mean, the ecosystem when it comes to female founders and just women in particular in the ecosystem, I don't think it's been the friendliest. I've been running the Tempest for over 3 years now. And I want to say, like, you know, things have gradually been improving, obviously, in the ecosystem, but to be honest, the statistics are still abysmal when it comes to funding in female-only startups. This is a statistic from the US landscape, essentially. So 2.8% of funding last year went to female founders out of $100 billion. That alone, to me, I think is just like, it's a horrible statistic, and it has grown by a couple of, I think, points in percentage from last time, but it's still a pretty, you know, every time I think about this, I think about all the work that we still need to do, and just in terms of, you know, leveling the playing field, whether it's conscious bias, unconscious bias. There's so many different factors that come into play, but this statistic is just such a stark reminder. And then speaking about the MENA region in particular, so we've got 5.8% of funding that went to female-only founders in the MENA region. This was in 2019, so this is essentially last year. And this is a couple of percentages in terms of a jump, because the number before this was 3.4% in 2018. But I think it is important to remember that, like, essentially there have been a few founders and a few startups that have skewed this graph. So it has not been the best year for female founders, although we have seen growth, and I hope we see more of a growth. But to be honest, I don't want to sugarcoat the reality and then window dress the actual numbers, or really say, you know, what, like, it's a rosy situation or landscape, because the truth is it's not.
I also wanted to bring up the, you know, there's also the other argument that, oh, there's probably just not enough pipeline of female founders either in the region, especially when people think of the region. And that's really a big fallacy. That we know there is no end to the number of amazing female founded organizations, startups out there. We have no problem, you know, as a angel group, and I know from other VCs, and, you know, there's no problem with pipeline. There's just a problem with funding.
And to be, I mean, this region does have some of the most incredible entrepreneurs in different industries, whether you want to look at medtech, whether you want to look at education, media, like just different aspects. So you know, being in the ecosystem and watching a lot of incredible entrepreneurs really working on their products and their mission, I think you're so right. This is a big fallacy, and I think There are incredible founders here, so that's definitely not a problem. And to be honest, like the data is pretty solid in terms of why funding female founders. I mean, based on the Kauffman Foundation, I mean, women entrepreneurs have actually been outperforming men, both in revenue and in return on investment when given the same access to resources and capital.
I love the 41 trillion US dollar in consumer spending. So they're saying in the next decade in the US, 2/3 of consumer spending will be driven by women. And, there's been lots of articles written about the pink economy. And I know, a lot of women don't like that. But anyways, it's just talking about the control that women have in terms of a lot of consumer spending decisions. And this isn't just in the traditional, what would be thought of as female sectors. So even in things like automotive purchases, electronic purchases, women make that decision for the entire household. I think the statistic is that over 50% of those decisions are made by women. So it's not just, it's every segment of consumer.
I mean, we're one of the largest consumer segments and unfortunately one of the most underserved ones.
Yeah.
So that is, and we're seeing things change in terms of companies starting to focus and switch in terms of how they're targeting. But I still think, given the spending power, I think that it is just such a powerful segment. I think we are part of a very powerful segment. But I just wish more companies, more organizations would actually take that more seriously.
Well, okay. And then also another statistic that's really discouraging, but has a lot of potential if you're really focusing on marketing, is that 76% of women don't feel like consumer brands get them. And so that's not good on the one hand, but there's a huge opportunity, right? If you are a consumer brand, to really look at what you're doing wrong. Well, why is your brand not resonating with that? With 76% of consumers.
That's, again, I think just another sort of, I think these are lost opportunities for a lot of different companies, and just that they're not tapping into. So I feel like this is in a large way a lot of lost revenue potential.
Yeah.
So speaking about COVID, something that we cannot seem to get rid of.
No. I've been really encouraged, though, to see some of the really innovative ways that companies have been managing right now. And it's tough. And I think there's going to be questions as to whether this is a good time to start a business. And I guess, the answer to that would be it depends on the sector. I don't know if you have a view about that, Mashal.
Yes, I do. So these are essentially some of the metrics in terms of what's been going on. And this really is based on consumer spending on both social spend as well as revenue that companies are making. And it's been really interesting to see because, the economy and everything else has been pretty scary. But the truth is, I mean, essential metrics, of course, when it comes to essentials, people are still continuing to buy. We saw a little bit of dip last week, but in general, it's obviously been rising. But the segment that seems to be the least affected is actually luxury. So luxury items and their numbers have been going pretty solid, and they've seen a big jump in the last couple of weeks. And they are at an all-time high. So this pink line that you can see on the different graphs is actually revenue. And they've sorted it out based on the different dates and whatnot. So these are pretty updated in terms of the numbers. But fashion, folks have been spending a lot on fashion, on luxury. And we've been seeing interesting trends in terms of, one, how folks are responding. So whether it's a need to impulse buy or purchase items, or wanting to make the most out of deals and whatnot, and it's been interesting to see how folks have been really responding to that.
And I apologize, Michelle, I jumped ahead in our presentation because I know we're going to talk about e-commerce a bit more.
Mhm.
Do you want to go back to yeah, here we are. Become as lean as possible and
Um,
be ready to pivot.
yeah, I think I think I do want to first off say, like, you know, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I mean, the last 2 months have been so difficult. And so I know there's been like this whole level of like uncertainty and fear, and a lot of our businesses have been affected. And we're seeing a whole sort of it kind of feels like a rug's been pulled from under our feet. At least that's how I've been personally feeling. And you know, kind of seeing how the year was so different at the start of the year. Like I think January, our predictions were so different in terms of revenue targets and everything else that we had planned for the rest of the year.
Mhm.
You add COVID to the mix and everything has changed. And over the weeks, things don't seem to be changing for short term. So you know, I think what we need to be is really be prepped for to outlast a whole year, if anything, right? So better safe than sorry. I think that's what it's been. And I do really want to say and emphasize on the fact that you know, first of all, you're not alone. It's you know, as we've been isolated and as we've sort of been at home, hopefully, and staying safe. I think we've seen a big shift in terms of just mental health, and in just everything else that's going on. It kind of feels like we're at a pretty low point, but I do want to say, like, you know, it's completely okay and to normalize when and accept what's happening.
Mhm.
To move forward, I think the first step is obviously, like, you know, you want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. I've been seeing a lot of different productivity and you know, being your best self posts, and I understand that the need to be positive. But you know, it's okay to give yourself permission and space to just realize that we're all coping in different ways. And we've got different coping mechanisms. And if you're not feeling your best self, I mean, you know, don't be too harsh on yourself. Um,
Michelle,
yeah.
no, sorry, just keep going.
Oh no, that's really it.
No, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because obviously our talk is you know, giving points about, you know, being business savvy and so forth. But you know, it's so true that this is new for everyone. And I don't know if you saw the one post that got lots of hate because, you know, someone essentially said, you know, in this time, if you haven't started a side hustle or earned a degree or something, then you're wasting your time. And someone's like, would someone just shut up the COVID motivators? You know, we've just had enough of that. So I think in terms of business, and I like what Sequoia Capital came out with 3 weeks ago, and
Yeah.
they said essentially, you know, it's a time to act fast, but you shouldn't be falsely optimistic. So I think it's totally fine to grieve because this is new for everyone. So I'm so glad that you brought up the mental health aspect because as entrepreneurs and investors, we need to really watch our health also.
I mean, absolutely. And I wish this was something we would normalize, right? This is a big
Yes.
conversation on its own, but I really do want to mention, and I'm so glad you brought up the note as well. But going back to the business side of things, you know, there are really two things that you need to do at this point. I think the first is become as lean as possible, right? So um, what you're aiming for is, you know, your business surviving. Like this is just survival mode at this point. So you want to become as lean as possible in terms of what you can and what you can't do, right? Any planning financially, any planning in terms of projects, in terms of investment that you were planning. I think I'd much rather be conservative versus you know, being underprepared for the tough months to come. And so I think because of that, the first point is obviously become as lean as possible, but the second, be ready to pivot. This is a time where we're seeing a lot of different changes with the lockdown that's been going on, and you know, it's going to be close to, how many weeks has it been now?
Lost track, I'm telling you. For us, it's only really since April 4th. Can you believe it? That we've been
Kind of feels like a
distancing.
lifetime.
Yes, March has had the most number of days, they've said, yes. Yeah.
So I mean, it's you know, it's impacted a lot of our businesses and our startups and just the whole ecosystem, I think, and the region as a whole. But this is a time where you want to go back to the drawing board and think of how you can pivot in a way that makes sense for the times to come, and for the landscape and really the situation that's going on right now. There are some things you know for a fact. You know for a fact that people are not going out as much. You know that people are spending more time on different activities. And I think the other thing is also like with summer coming up, you know that schools and colleges are going to be off. So there are a couple of things that we do know, right? So keeping those in mind, I think that helps in terms of thinking about where to pivot or what to be able to do.
No, and I think let's spend a little bit more time on this slide, because I think I want to talk about some pivoting models, but I also want to talk about some pragmatic stuff in terms of being as lean as possible. We'll talk more about fundraising later on, but realistically right now, everyone's trying to shore up their cash flow. And, you know, if you know you're not going to meet your cash flow needs, and Mashal has said, you know, have a runway of 12 months, but we've seen, you know, 12 months to 24 months realistically, right? Have a cash flow, have a plan. So now is the time to, you know, draw on credit lines, you know, talk to family and friends if you're worried about the cash situation. Some other really pragmatic things you're doing, I'm sure you're doing already, and that's to make sure you're making you're bringing in every dirham, and you're calling, you know, you're watching your payables. So if you need to incentivize, you know, give a 10% discount if you know someone pays within 10 days, you know, anything you can to make sure you're bringing in the funds that are owed to you. Now's the time to be chasing your payables. And you know, if you were looking at your budget, you know, on a monthly basis, you should be looking at that on a weekly, if not on a daily basis. So just to really keep on top of all costs. Yeah.
Oh no, please go on.
No, I was just going to talk about one of the things I really like is, you know, obviously people are worried about their staff. And, you know, one of the initiatives I really like is the whole concept of sharing staff. And the government has come out with a portal where you know, you can share staff. And that's one way to, you know, hopefully keep your staff employed. But there are obviously sectors that are doing well and need additional staff.
And there are a lot of resources that, you know, we will definitely talk about after and near the end of the presentation. But speaking of pivoting and messaging, I do want to speak about marketing and the messaging that you're sending out. I have seen way too many tone-deaf emails in the last 2 months to feel like every time I see an email that says COVID, I just want to ignore it, because I know it's going to be the same custom message tweaked a little bit, and it doesn't feel relevant to me, honestly, as a customer. I want business leaders to feel empathetic, but at the same time, I don't want to feel like I'm just getting like an email where, you know, I'm just, again, it shouldn't feel like it's a had to do kind of a thing. And you know, there's been way too many tone deaf messages when it comes to marketing. Whether it's text messages from companies being like, hey, like, you know, do you want to book so and so services for after the COVID, and you know, reading those, I'm thinking like, I don't even know when. It just kind of feels like another reminder in terms of we don't know how long this is going to last. And so I think you want to be careful in terms of what messaging you're pushing out, and of course you want to be as creative as you can. But again, I think it's important to kind of think about, like, take a step back and really think about the kind of ads that you're pushing across on different socials, the kind of messaging, which is so important. You want to make sure it's empathetic. You want to keep in mind what people are going through right now, and then you want to push across what you want, right? At the same time, we've also been seeing a lot of like really interesting messaging from companies, whether it's personalized notes with you know, going a little bit above and beyond, and I've been seeing a lot of posts of people posting these notes, or just anything that's a little bit more in terms of how personal the messaging is becoming. So if it's possible, try to do that if you can. And you know, I feel like we are at an age where again, your customers are pretty smart. They're smart enough to understand what's going on, and obviously what you're going through, right? So I think that's the other part of it. But speaking of pivoting, Lucy, I thought we could speak about a couple of interesting pivots that we've seen, and then
Sure.
you know, I also love.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I just wanted to follow up on what you were just talking about. And, you know, one of the ideas I did like was this concept of a bond, right? So some of the restaurants and beauty service companies are asking that their clients go online, buy a voucher, a bond that they can use later on. So, of course, that's in order to ensure cash flow, right? So I think that's a good, innovative way to keep cash flow coming in and allow your really loyal clients to help you during this time. But do you think that's kind of, is that one of the ideas that you would not really like, Mashal? Do you think that's kind of, does that not sit well with you?
So personally, I don't know if I would go for something like that, just because like I don't know when I would be able to use it.
Sure.
And I'm not sure if I would be as sold in terms of like, you know, just yeah, it just feels like things are too uncertain for me to want to purchase again these bonds. Like I know I'd be using them, but I just, because I don't know when, I just don't think I'd be doing that right now. And I think
Yeah.
yeah, so that is
Okay.
something.
Okay, so that was one idea. But what I'll use also, you know, one of our portfolio companies, Little Thinking Minds. You know, obviously right now, the wise thing to do is to try to go online, create webinars, create content to post out there. So Little Thinking Minds is an Arabic language portal, but the majority of their clients are schools. And right now, you know, obviously with distance learning, it's impacting, you know, their business model a little bit. But what they're doing is they are actually putting together webinars of their content, and that's fabulous because they already have content and everything digitized anyways. But if you can, you know, if you're an after school provider, you know, we've seen personal trainers. You know, everybody is doing the best that they can to maybe not initially monetize. They might want to get people in, you know, try out, you know, try the workout, and then once they have a sticky audience, then they'll start monetizing. But I do like the idea of if you've been thinking of putting your content you know, into a video series, that this might be the right time.
You know, it's absolutely the right time. It's the time to go digital, and you know everyone's online at this point. I think there's a couple of things we've seen as people are consuming more than ever. Our data on readers and just in terms of internet consumption and content consumption numbers have really been increasing day by day. People are spending more time than ever online, and they're consuming, right? And I think this is the time where you want to think, again, when I say go back to the drawing board and think about what you can do. If you are a cafe or whether you're, you know, a restaurant, or if you're in the F&B space, think about what are people doing right now. I think I don't know about y'all, but my Instagram has been filled with bread and cakes and just baking, and
Yeah.
I'm equally guilty of this because I've been just making so much more food than I have probably in my entire life. I make brownies every few days. I just can't stop myself.
There's a run on flour. Yeah, absolutely.
So what can you do to make the most of it? You know, businesses in the US and other regions have been really trying to be as creative as they can. So I really love the idea of DIY kits. If people aren't ordering, is there a possibility of you creating kits that people can order and then make you know, these items or food from? It might not be the most comfortable thing to think about, but again, this is not the most comfortable time to be going through, right?
Yep.
So you want to think about things you might not have thought of before. This is one example, like the DIY kits, because you know people are spending time doing this. And in the summer, folks are again, you want to think about the fact that summer camps, they're not going to be any summer camps, there're not going to be any traveling going on in the summer, and from what we can see, at least for a couple of months, right? So what can you do to help folks incentivize, whether it's parents and their kids, whether it's activities for millennials, Gen Zs, like whichever segment you're targeting. Think about these things and think about what can you do that you haven't done before, or what can you offer as a service. Whether it's, and again, there's so many communities that we've seen being created in the last couple of, and I feel like there's a new one created every week or so, but people are feeling more alone than they've ever felt. And so they want to feel connected. They want to feel as a part of a community. One pivot that we actually have to do, and that we're working on, is essentially like we are launching a membership program. And it was because in terms of revenue stream, so advertising is our biggest revenue stream, but as media budgets have been cut, we have been pretty impacted, right? So we had to think about what can we do to kind of like pivot and change it up in terms of growth and revenue and numbers and whatnot. So that's what we're focusing on. But I do want to emphasize on the fact, like, don't feel like the tech capacity is a reason that you can't pivot. I think that's one thing that we can sometimes tend to do, is kind of feel like, okay, we don't have enough resources, or we don't have tech developers. You don't need to invest in a lot of tech. There already are existing services, and there are resources that can help you create these. So whether it's webinars that you want to charge for, or whether it's again for your services, or whatever it is, like think about these different sort of outlets that you can sort of pivot to, right? Like, this is a time where you can, and again, it is a time where the region's changing. So things before are again, we're seeing a whole different, like, just consumption patterns and behaviors. So I don't think I've seen people actually watch webinars, and I never thought I'd actually see the day that.
Here we are presenting one. Yes. Yes. How many webinars have we all watched now? It's become a whole new medium. And I just wanted to follow up with what you were saying, Michelle. I know later on you'll talk about some tech, right, that people can implement quite easily. But in terms of the DIY, there have been spas that are like, okay, we know that you can't come in for your regular facial, so we put a DIY kit and we could send it to your home. So it's packed full of product, and they're selling the DIY kit. I love it. And then lastly, because we spent a lot of time on this slide, but lastly, what I really like is, okay, again, we're worried about money. So what the fitness centers have done, because they've got all that, all the capital, equipment just sitting there, it's paid for, all their equipment. So what are they doing? They're renting that out. So you could rent a treadmill or whatever from a fitness center. And I really like that, because I can only imagine how many businesses are sitting on equipment that's not being utilized.
100%. I think that's a really great pivot as well.
Yes.
Awesome. So we've already, essentially gone through the numbers.
And actually, Michelle, on that, we have a question on the luxury. So one gentleman is saying on the forecast for luxury estimates, they're seeing a 30 to 40% decline in luxury goods, and they just wanted to have an elaboration on the data source. Maybe later on we can.
Yeah. So the source for this is actually Within, and they handle consumer spending for companies with over $5 billion in annual spending. So they work with over just a bunch of different organizations, startups, SMEs, and just large organizations as well. So these are not forecasts. This is actual data based on consumer spending with their clients.
And I'm loving the interaction we're getting. And so someone's just sent in a link from the Financial Times saying women will be accumulating 72 billion of the world's financial assets by 2020, which is similar to men. So awesome. Okay. Services to help you pivot.
Yeah, so these are a couple of tech services in terms of how you can, be more digital. The first is Shopify. So this is the first thing. And again, as an entrepreneur, I'm going to speak about from a place of, like, again, a lot of times you don't have the privilege to invest into big tech teams or even tech teams. You might not have a tech background, and you might not have certain resources or access to them, right? That's totally okay. These are services for anyone, regardless of how experienced you are in tech. I can tell you for a fact that these services have been made for anybody to be able to sign up to and to be able to make the most out of, right? So Shopify is an amazing platform. You can not just have your website up and running and then have your stocking items and everything else, but they've got incredible integrations. So check out their integrations. I would say spend a little bit of time educating yourself in terms of what the right integrations for you would be and how to make the most of it. They've got templates, so it's okay if you don't have a website, or if you have a website that you haven't started selling these services on and don't have payment gateways on. So you know, that's one incredible resource. And again, if you have a dev who can work with this, that's great. If you don't, that's completely okay. Gumroad is for creators, artists, and freelancers, but I've also seen businesses selling ebooks here and in finding creative ways to use this. And this is how you can use folks and sell one-off items as well as online, you know, content. So whether it's again, ebooks, guides, whatever you want to call it, it's really easy to sign up to, pretty simple to go through. Eventbrite, so if you want to host webinars and charge for them, again, you can sign up to Eventbrite. You can have a ticketing thing, and then you can use Zoom or any of these, or GoToMeeting, for example, for streaming the webinars. And to keep it very exclusive to folks who are paying for these. If you've got folks in terms of your email list, if you've been sending out an email newsletter, that's great, because you can start with, say, for example, free webinars and then move on to paid ones, like Lucy said. Or if you just directly feel like, you know, you have enough value to offer a paid webinar and you feel like that's okay to experiment with, that's totally okay as well. And finally, Patreon for subscriptions and services. You can create different tiers in terms of the perks that you can offer to different customers, and make it as attractive as possible. With different tiers, different add-ons, and again, these are just a couple of services, but these can really help you in terms of making that pivot. You know, it takes a little bit of time to understand and to feel like, okay, you can do it, but I just want you to feel like it's okay to make this pivot and to do it quick. The numbers are changing in terms of what's been happening, right? So these are, again, a couple of tools. They are developed in a way where there are, like I said, integrations, and they are easy to add on to. So these are just a couple of tools that you can get started with, and they have really great guides as well in terms of onboarding, in terms of even how to get started. And there's enough people online who have created a lot of resources regarding each of these services. So whether it's specific case studies on how to make it work for a very specific industry, a specific type of startup, you will find data on this.
Mashal, that's so awesome. And we've got a comment saying that they love the comments about the pivoting. And I think this is a time that the whole theory of to fail fast, and to make sure you know that you, again, the Sequoia Capital memo said that no one ever regrets making fast decisions in challenging times. So I think that's great. And we've got quite a few questions about funding. So I was wondering if that was our next slide. I know we've got.
It is. Just one quick point. Look, it's completely okay to be afraid of failure. I know every time we have a project launching, there's a million and one thoughts that go through my head. But you're so right. Fail faster, and then fail differently. That's the only thing I can say, because you can't afford not to at this point. You can't afford not to experiment and to pivot, and to change up the game, to be the best that you can be in terms of your company and in terms of survival.
Well, it's awesome, and I love that you use the Tempest as an example, right? And you guys are doing that. So we're going to talk about investment, and then we will make sure we answer the questions about reaching out to actual investors. But so, yeah, what do you think, Mashal? Is this the right time to fundraise?
No, and this is something that I really wanted to talk about, because I've been seeing a lot of events and folks, a lot of investors actually, and even those from the region going on and saying fundraise right now. And you know, I think realistically, anyone who's gone through a fundraising round will understand it is not easy. It takes time, and a lot of times what it falls back to is evaluations. if you fundraise right now at a time where the economy is down, at a time where, you know, your numbers might have taken a hit, you do not want to be giving away too much. You don't want, and I'm sorry, Lucy, I'm going to use the word investor sharks.
Yes, I'm not one of them, but go ahead, use that word, because we're going to talk more about it.
Yeah, because honestly, I think at this point, of course, this is a perfect opportunity, and I'm sure like Lucy will speak more about the investor side, but as a founder, I don't think this is a good time to raise investment. I would say like, and I'll just, you know, you want to be careful with who you're picking on, because again, you want to do your due diligence on investors and again, you know, who you're even raising capital from. But the truth is, it takes time, and if investors are the last, like, unless it's the last resort, I would try to survive the next couple of months. I've written 6 as a minimum, but you know, honestly, like, I would say wait for as long as you can and try to survive like the worst period. If you already had a previous round that you were in talks with and you're just about to close, it's a whole different story. Starting right now is going to be a very different ball game, and I want you to think about it from a founder's perspective, because running your own business and giving equity away, and again, you don't want to be, again, you know, equity and valuations, you don't want to be giving your company for a lower, for what, you know, for a lower valuation essentially, and I think that's what it kind of falls down to at the end of the day.
So and speaking with my investor hat on, so there's some pretty discouraging statistics, Michelle. I don't know if you saw, CB Insights said that seed funding is down 80%, yeah, year on year, and it's not a big surprise because it's obviously the riskiest time to invest in a company. And so that doesn't bode well for companies that are startups. But the positive and the positive of that is that when things recover, seed funding is also the first to go up. So versus Series A, Series B. So seed funding is the first to recover, and it recovers faster. But right now, everyone is staying away typically from really initial investing, and frankly, as an investor, what we all talk about is, yes, so now is a buying opportunity if you are still investing, and it's a chance to the jargon is, that, like Michelle said, that the investor shark jargon, where it's a chance to be able to get deals cheap, but on the positive is that, as an entrepreneur, it's also your chance to really remake your company. And so what investors will be doing is that they're going to spend a lot longer on the due diligence process. And not only will they spend longer on the due diligence process, but they're going to be looking at the founders and the company to see how they are reacting to this situation, and if they're making the best of it, and if they're being innovative. So yeah, that's just, no surprise, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
I mean, I do want to, I do want to mention that, like, again, not every situation and scenario is the same, right? So again, you know what's best for your business, but again, my founder's perspective and an entrepreneur perspective is really, this is a time for grit and resilience, and be determined to change up, and again, try to be as sustainable as you can be if you can manage that. I don't think it's as much about, I think we do glamorize fundraising and investment. I think revenue is a lot sexier, excuse my language, and it is a lot more, I think as a founder, the best situation to be in is to have increasing revenue. So again, be careful with investment, understand all the sort of not the, I don't want to say downfall, but essentially understand the strings attached
Yes.
with it, right? And again, you want to be in a position, I'm a strong believer of, if you can and if you are in a position, fundraise when your numbers are better, because you can negotiate better.
Yes.
And I think that's, you know, again, to do what's right for your company and to do what's right for your startup, it's important to think about that before you kind of jump into the process.
And Mashal, like, you know, I when times get better, I'm sure people will be ramping up their fundraising. I wanted to address a few of the fundraising questions. And one in particular is, you know, how do I meet investors, or how do I meet female investors specifically? And so I'm going to talk a little bit, and then Mashal, I really want you to talk about how much hustling you did to get your raise with the Tempest. And you could, I'm no problem with you talking about your situation with me, because I think it's really good to give pragmatic advice. You know, I think what's great about this region is that, you know, people are very open. And as you know, there's not a lot of organizations that are specifically funding female founders. So, you know, there's My Shift Capital. Heather Henyon has started that. And anyways, later on, I can give you details. And you know, and My Shift Capital actually has female founder and founder hours. So if you want to get advice, you can go. I think it's 2 hours every Monday. So we can talk more about that. But Mashal, I don't know if you want, as a founder, I would really love for you to share how you went about fundraising, because I know it wasn't easy.
So we did a small round back in summer of 2018. And to be honest, it was my first experience fundraising. You know, I went in pretty scared, to be honest, because I had just heard so many different horror stories about what goes on in terms of fundraising, timelines, all of that stuff. But I think there were a couple of things. So the first was I was super prepped in terms of metrics, numbers, and growth, right? So what I quickly realized was every investor, so me and my co-founder essentially, like we'd work on different aspects, but every investor has a different approach in terms of growth and strategy. And so you kind of want to understand what they want to look at, and it's going to be different things. And by the end of it, you're going to come a lot more prepared, because you sometimes prep documents as you go along. But you know, that was the first one. But I think more importantly, I think I spent a lot of time understanding the region, in terms of who the players were in terms of like investors, and more importantly, I think who would I want on board as a company that's very mission driven, and as a company where, again, our mission to amplify the voices of women, and in media and just around the world, right? It was a global mission, but we wanted folks who believed in the values that we had. So before I even thought about fundraising, I just wanted to familiar myself with people who were working on this mission, not for investment, but just as an ecosystem as a whole. Right, so that was one of the things, and Lucy was someone who I had heard speak at a couple of events. I'm more of an introvert, not more, I am a complete introvert, so events and crowds scare me a lot, and I have, like, I'm really shy, so I you know, I'm not comfortable just going up to people and introducing myself. So it was actually at the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival in 2017 when there was a mentoring session that Lucy was doing, where she was taking time out to mentor startups and founders who were showcasing. So I signed on to that to be able to meet her, because I had seen her at events, but I just didn't have the courage to walk up to her and introduce myself. And that was really the first time I connected with Lucy. And then I asked her to become my mentor, and she understood my mission. She understood the startup and everything else that we were working towards. But this is not when we were planning to raise investment. It was just to be able to understand how to, I think, one, I wanted to understand an investor's perspective on startups and founders. And then a year later, what ended up happening was, as I started becoming more involved with the startup ecosystem and understanding, I think I made kind of like a wish list in terms of, these are people who have incredible values. These are people I have known for a while, and they know what we do, and they're familiar with me and the work that I'm doing. And then third, these are the kind of people who I would want as cheerleaders, and who I know for a fact would support us and who would believe in the Tempest. Now, once you've kind of finalized and done due diligence, so speaking to other founders potentially, who these investors have you know, either invested in or again supported. You want to do due diligence on that aspect. And then the second thing is you want to think strategically. So every person, even in terms of what value they'd be bringing, because there's money, but then there's smart money. And I think, again, whatever route you choose, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way. This was just my experience. I wanted folks with who strategically made sense in terms of if we wanted advice in certain areas, in certain segments, who are the people we could count on in our team. And then went from there to approaching folks, and it was very much of a, like, we kept a timeline on it. We went prepared with numbers, and that's how we initially fundraised. And we were able to close that. We didn't have a lot of press or PR about it, but it, I want to say, like, I thought it would be a lot tougher, but we weren't raising a very big round either. But you know, it was one of those things where when you go prepared, and every investor had a different sort of outlook on what they were looking for. Some wanted to look at our very specific and getting granular in terms of what every single dollar would be going towards. Others were more focused on where we had spent on before and why. Some were more focused on our data in terms of our analytics, and we were very transparent in terms of, you know, we can get on a call and show you our analytics and our dashboard and our actual numbers. We're willing to be 100% transparent, but because we want you to understand what we do, how we do it, and what we plan to do with the amount that we're raising, but we also have a timeline on it. So it was very particular, and then yeah, I think it's always the first investor is always the toughest to close, but once you've got that, I think you can kind of, you get onto this momentum, and it's a lot quicker sometimes because you're also more prepared in terms of documents, in terms of questions and how you answer. But I think about how you fit in within someone's investment or just plan as a whole. If you don't see yourself aligning or falling into that, it will be a lot more difficult to get them to invest in you. I think that's one part people sometimes maybe don't pay as much attention to. Yeah.
And that's fabulous. I don't think I could add much more because you can't get more detail than hearing it from someone that's actually gone through the fundraising process. And I loved what Mashal said, to really understand when you approach investors, what is their portfolio, and that's usually very open. And you know, if they haven't ever invested in your sector or have no interest, then it probably doesn't make sense to waste your time with that particular group, right? Mashal, I see that we have 8 more minutes, and I really wanted to get to some of the resources that we were going to give people, but at the same time, I wanted to I want to put out a question that Shaynor's asked, a great question. Do either one of us know of any companies that have collaborated together, or even like thought of joining together during this particular time? And I'm racking my brains thinking, I feel like there is.
Yes, so SME Rise Collective is a bunch of different SMEs and agencies and companies who've teamed up together, so you can support, collaborate, or essentially invest. What they're doing is they're bundling packages to help with marketing, PR, and just brand awareness. And there's, you know, you can donate as an individual for as little as, say, 100 dirhams, or you can join on as a collaborator and you know, get one of the packages. But what this is doing is a lot of it's helping businesses to get the awareness from a marketing and just an eyeballs perspective, and then it's also helping agencies and other companies in the region survive and be able to pay salaries and whatnot. So this is an incredible initiative. This was launched by Tishnash and one other PR company, I believe. But yeah, so this is essentially the one. Others, so Entrepreneur Middle East has a pretty like wholesome list in terms of resources and guides and discounts and all these other things that different startups and organizations are offering. Shara launched a Slack channel called Small Biz UAE for different players in the ecosystem to connect, whether you want to ask for advice, mentorship. Again, these are 2 really incredible resources that I personally was going through. And you know, again, you can join in on. The Entrepreneur Middle East list is actually an ongoing one. So if you are a company who's offering something, I would say reach out to their team and send them your, you know, what you're offering, whether the discount or, again, the resources and whether it's mentoring or whatever it is. Like essentially, you know, it is an ongoing list. So you can, again, have your stuff added onto it.
I was just going to jump in here, Michelle, with another question. And I'm a huge advocate of anyone starting an investment group. And there's a question about maybe getting female employees in the oil and gas sector to provide them with business investment opportunities. And obviously the long-term benefit is that this can go towards retirement planning for the women in that sector. So I love it. And Hilma, I don't see why you wouldn't start that, honey. So yeah, that doesn't exist, not that I know of, but every organization started because someone felt there was a need, whether they wanted to grow their wealth, and we do, women want to grow their wealth, and why wouldn't you think of starting that? I'm very happy to take this offline and talk to you more about how you would go about doing that. Okay, sorry, Michelle.
Oh, no, that's it. So these are a couple of others. I hope y'all can take screenshots. I'll just go over them one by one. Take screenshots, and then I think you can, again, check them out offline. So these are 3 different initiatives. Accelerate Her, Sharjah Business Women Council, Endeavor. Again, our Jamil has grants for different like creatives and artists and whatnot. Again, the SME Rights Collective already spoken about, the Ambassador. Legal advice, so we've got that firm, the Code by Bezat. So we've got a bunch of different initiatives and organizations who are stepping up and really working towards different things. But you know what, that's not to say if you're thinking of something, partner up, collaborate. You can reach out to me as well as Lucy. I think there's just so much. I think the more of us that can work on stuff, I think we just need all the support that we can as an ecosystem right now. And the more of us that join in, I think the more I think we all really just get through this together. That's really the only way that I see us moving forward.
There's also a great question about, if you were just starting a company before COVID, how would you right now go about trying to find a mentor? And I think, well, everyone's at home, so where you can find them, probably easier now than before. I think if you're talking about someone that's a startup mentor, again, I'm sure if you spoke to Mashal and I, then we would probably have people that we know that would be very happy to mentor.
I think, and again, one, please don't be afraid to reach out. Most of my emails and reach outs are, cold emails. Like, people forget the art of cold emailing and writing good emails. And I don't mean like a standard, like, make it personal, do a little bit of research, spend time on this if you actually want results. I invest time into understanding who I'm reaching out to, what for. I have clarity on that, and I work on understanding what I want to do before reaching out. And you're right, folks will respond, but also sometimes it's just about follow-ups. Like, I remember this one person I wanted to get in touch with, and she's incredibly busy, so I would email every 10 days for 4 months with an update, or just being like, I think I just became annoying at some point, but then I was able to get a meeting with her, and it took a long time, but I think follow-up is key a lot of times, because when you're persistent enough, at some point.
Yes, absolutely. Persistence is really important. And again, trying to find someone that, why, there's so many mentors that you could reach out to, but, be very clear as to why and what you want from that mentoring relationship. Is it because you want more help on the fundraising side to understand that, or are you just still working on your business model? So that's very important also. There's also a great, sorry, go on.
Just one thing. So Techstars and Y Combinator both have incredible resources for startups with different aspects from A to Z, whether you're in the ideation phase, whether you're in the incubation phase, whatever phase you're at, even if you're growing, they have amazing resources that are completely free, you can sign up for and do. So if you feel like, there are no program deadlines or programs that are going on currently in the region, online is the best way to learn as much as you can. And these are great resources.
We've also been asked, and we have just literally hit 1 hour. And the last question was, will we be able to share out the fabulous slides? Shruti, I don't know if you're on.
Hello,
I'm sure
I'm on. Hi, everyone. The voice
Shruti's
from
with the Pearl, she's wrote the Pearl Initiative. I'm sure you could share out the slides on our behalf.
Oh, yes, absolutely. What we will be doing is we have been recording this as it was going on. So we'll be uploading a copy to our YouTube page, and it will also be up on Young Arab Leaders YouTube page.
Well, thank you, everybody. Michelle, it was great doing a webinar with you. It almost felt like we were in the same room. And of course, a big thanks to Pearl Initiative and Young Arab Leaders.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for listening in.